Starting in 5 seconds. Questions of equity apart, the mode and scale of subsidizing has had two effects. One has been to induce a faster rate of growth of enrollments at this level than is otherwise likely to have taken place. In several parts of the country, the fees charged for higher education have remained unchanged for decades, and the rising costs have been almost wholly covered by the subsidies from government. Higher education has therefore become almost free for those who are in a position to meet the other related expenses. The other effect has been to encourage in this sphere, particularly in the last decade, a kind of entrepreneurship with little commitment to the goals of higher education, where the rate of subsidy is high and the rest of the expenditure can be almost wholly covered by fees collected from students. A college can be started and run with very little exertion on the part of the sponsors. In Delhi, 95% of the excess expenditure of a college on all approved items over its income from fees is met by the University Grants Commission, the sponsoring body, whether it is a private agency or a local authority, needs therefore to cover only a very small fraction of the total expenditure on running a college. Naturally, there is no dearth of entrepreneurs for starting colleges with an eye on the patronage and influence they can exercise through their control over them, though the extent of subsidy is not as high elsewhere. The position is not very different in several other parts of the country where liberal grants in aid are given by state governments to colleges. The main qualification required by the promoters of higher education under these conditions is only that they have the contacts for securing the necessary financial and other support from the powers that be, where the rate of subsidy is not so high. Some adjustments are called for. These are usually made in the fees charged from the students and in the teacher student ratios maintained. Thus, the annual fee for undergraduate education ranges all the way from less than rupees 100 per student. The colleges in Rajasthan to well over rupees 300 per student. In Bombay, the average number of students assigned to a teacher also varies from as low as 12 in some areas to more than twice that figure in others. This subsidy has to be discontinued. All this has usually a decisive impact at the higher levels of decision making and administration in the universities, for both the representatives of college managements and of teachers. Secure representation in the various bodies of the university of which they form a part. Changes in the structure and content of courses are therefore usually resisted if they call for more appointments at the college level than the managements are prepared to make, or if much more effort is required on the part of the existing staff. If any teaching is organized at the university level, as is generally done for postgraduate courses, the principle of representation has to be usually given considerable weight irrespective of academic considerations. The various sectional interests involved have to be taken into account also when examiners are appointed by universities, and sometimes even when the results of the examination are declared. Universities, as organized now, are in fact highly vulnerable to pressures of various kinds. The representation given to colleges, the system of elections to the more important decision making bodies, and direct dependence on government grants are all potential instruments for gaining influence and exerting pressure within universities. It is not surprising, therefore, that when teachers and students are also free to participate in political activity, universities get affected very quickly by all the undercurrents and conflicts in the society of which they are a part. One of the major problems now is that while political forces are able to gain entry very easily, the universities do not have the means for effectively coping up with them. Under these conditions, growth in size beyond a point becomes a particular serious handicap. Not only are there few economies of scale to be gained by such expansion, but diseconomies set in through their greater vulnerability to pressures from outside and from within. This has become a major problem for many Indian universities. The growing tendencies towards regionalism in the country have also had serious effects on higher education. These tendencies are generally expressed in demands relating to the medium of instructions. Some of these demands are based on sound educational principles and are wholly justifiable, but in their most extreme form, they usually indicate either ignorance of the minimum requirements of higher education or inward looking conduct of a kind that places considerations of a self character above these requirements. In practice, both have been in evidence. More specifically, the problem arises when instruction at the postgraduate level is sought to be given in the regional languages. For most of the relevant literature at that level is usually not available. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, the directorates of industries of the states, which are the implementing agencies of the programs of small scale industries development are expected to ensure this. Therefore, the center expects the state governments to do something about this. As far as the governments are concerned, they are complacent about all this. They are blissfully silent about the possible steps they may take in future, at least to plug the loopholes to prevent such recurring eventuality. They are not prepared to do that even now. They shift the responsibility or pass on the buck and say that state governments are responsible because the small scale industries is within their purview. That is one stock reply which is often given. So, sir, this is how the multinational companies, big monopoly houses, etc., have come to occupy a place of pivotal importance and accumulated the riches in a very speedy manner by concerning all the benefits legitimately due to small scale sector. Now, sir, the other day discussion took place in this house about the amounts held in the Swiss banks. How this is happening, a study by the International Monetary Fund has confirmed that deposits in Swiss banks are to the extent of about rupees 1300 crores, at least 15 to 20 times that money lies in the secret accounts of the Indians in the banks of Hong Kong, USA, and several other places. Sir, it is estimated that the total amount thus come to about rupees 30,000 crore. This figure is again escalating at the rate of 15 to 20% per year. Last year, foreign trade was of the order of about rupees 3,000 crore. At least 10% of this cost goes towards secret accounts, which covers trade only. There are defense and other contracts also. Therefore, we can very well understand what will happen in that sector also. Instead of the money being made available for this country, it is being kept elsewhere in furtherance of their own interest. It is not available for any national purpose and developmental purpose. Honorable Sir, I want to make a passing reference to the big business entering into small scale sectors and cornering all the incentives, concessions, and exemptions due to small scale sectors with a view to harness these benefits. Large houses have started setting up their own units in the small scale sectors. Prominent monopoly houses and Farah companies have done so and are still doing this. Some of the small scale sector enterprises are owned by the multinational companies. Small scale units are small because of the limited resources of the entrepreneur. The definition of the small scale sector, which is so changed as to permit monopoly houses to enter into the small scale sector. Therefore, what I urge that the minister should give a considered thought to the definition of the small scale sector, which is giving every scope to the multinationals to enter into small scale sector and corner all the benefits. The monopoly houses enter the small scale sector, and the several companies numbering 290 are in the small scale sector because of the lacunae in the definition, which is deliberately retained. I use the word deliberately. I am sorry if I am wrong. I may be corrected. I will be too happy for that corrections. Large houses entry in the small scale sector by virtue of their large resources, both technical and commercial places the real small scale manufacturer at a definite disadvantage. He is eliminated. He is being annihilated. The big shark is eating the small fish. There is no turnover ceiling. There is no reference to the character of ownership. There is a constant upward revision of investment ceiling. I give a more glaring example of an electronic company, Weston, for instance. It registered itself as a small scale unit, but the amount it spends on publicity alone must be several times larger than the total investment of most of the small scale units. I will give one more instance of companies which are subsidiaries to big houses. There is a big list available. The minister himself must be knowing it. The government of India says that small scale undertakings which are subsidiaries or are owned or controlled by any other undertaking are not eligible for special concessions. Let the minister then identify those industries. The stock reply is this is a matter within the purview of the state government. This information is not maintained by center. Let them not come forward with such replies. When I put a question, a reply came that the information was not maintained by the center. This was the reply. Is the government in the dark, or do they want us to be in the dark? In either case, it is not good for the country. Government have more than 50% equity. We have private companies. When government have more than 50% of equity and their government has a definite and decisive says stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, at the very outset, I congratulate the Ministry of Steel and Mines for its efficient working. There has been in the past propaganda on behalf of the private sector that it alone can deliver the goods, it alone is affection, and that the public sector is notorious for mismanagement, for inefficiency, and for loss of production. Both the things have been exploited by the working of the public sector since the year 1981, and in streamlining the administration of the public undertakings, the Steel Ministry has played a key and crucial role. there has been a mismanagement in this company and its management was taken over. I am personally of the view that whenever mismanagement is visible in any private sector undertaking, then instead of only taking its management for a limited period, it should be taken over permanently, and it should not be a short and half hearted measure. The company should have been taken over, acquired, as it is sought to be done now in the year 1982 itself, once the government comes to the conclusion that the company's affairs are not being conducted in an efficient manner, and when the government has to invest funds to the tune of crores of rupees, where is the question of reserving the decision that it may go back to the same old management? Now, the second thing is that there is a new strategy which is being resorted to by this private business. They somehow or other welcome the takeover of their undertaking, and they start the process of mismanagement deliberately so that the government may be compelled to take it over. They do not invest any money in the renovation of the machinery, which ultimately becomes nothing but a junk, and they would have derived the maximum benefit out of their investment long time ago, and at the time when it is being taken over, nothing worthwhile is left in the undertaking. So it should be taken over at the earliest stage. We are now talking of commitment to the philosophy of the Constitution. The philosophy of the Constitution means that we are committed to the establishment of an egalitarian society where there would be not only political and legal justice, but there would be economic justice. If we want socialism, it should come in a proper and effective way. Those who have no commitment to the concept of public undertakings, socialism, and working for the underdog should have no place in top management of any undertaking. The difficulty lies in that we are half hearted in these matters. We have the mentality of private businessmen, and also we have the concept and the ideal of a public undertaking. The increasing participation of workers is the only safeguard for the success of any public undertaking in this country. There have been cases of inflated sales and fraudulent transactions about which my honorable friend made a pointed reference. I would submit that the Economic Intelligence Bureau should play an effective role in checking malpractices in such big undertakings. Unless this is done, public undertakings would come in a big way for sharp and hostile criticism from all those who are opposed to the ideology of socialism. As regards 4% interest allowable on the quantum of compensation, my honorable friend has said that this is not fair. The government cannot afford to pay the same amount of higher interest as is done in the case of private sector. The Constitution itself has provided that the quantum of compensation would not be justifiable. It has been done with a deliberate objective. If compensation at market value is to be paid to private individuals, then it would not be possible to take over the undertakings at all. If the shareholders have taken the maximum benefit out of their investment, they should not be paid any compensation, and only nominal compensation can be paid. The Constitution allows legislation in that respect. I congratulate the Minister on bringing forward this progressive bill. The steel industry is the basis of our industrial structure. In fact, the extent of industrialization of a country is measured by the amount of steel consumed per head of the population. This industrial undertaking, namely the Iron and Steel Company, is a big industrial complex, and it consists of not only an integrated steel plant but also an iron foundry. The company was started initially after the First World War, and by 1952 it had increased its capacity to 1 million tons. But the decline in the fortunes of the company started in the 60s, and by 1963 the production had gone down to 1 lakh tons per year, that is 13% of its rated capacity, as stated by the Honorable Minister. In fact, its production had reached a figure of 8 lakh tons. From that, it came down to 1 lakh tons, which was a result of the rotten management and the low price of steel stock. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, we were expecting that this bill, which is before us and which has been passed by the Rajya Sabha, would deal with some of the vital issues that are agitating the minds of the people and their living conditions also. But unfortunately, it does not do so. The reality is that in the original Act of 1955, we have about 13 categories of essential commodities, including cattle fodder, coal, automobile parts, cotton, wool, textiles, raw cotton, raw jute, drugs, food grains, iron ore, petroleum and petroleum products, sugar and sugar cane. But this bill touches only a few things. Here, the vital aspects are not even touched up. There is no statement of objects and reasons appended with the bill so that we can grasp the meaning of this. As far as this bill is concerned, it deals with some formality and technical matters only. When we touch upon this subject, we know that there are 3 aspects which are important, such as production, distribution, and price. With regard to production, the whole country knows that there has been a bumper crop of food grains, and we are patting ourselves on the back for that. Besides that, there have been huge imports. With regard to groundnut also, the minister has been declaring that there has been a bumper crop of 80 lakh tons, and it comes to about 40% more than the last year's production. Here we have just now heard that the National Textile Corporation is playing its part in stopping production and making the sick and deserted units viable ones. In such a situation, when there is production on such a huge scale, what is the factor that is hindering the proper distribution and check on price rise in our country? I would like to ask, in view for the fact that the production in public sector is growing, even the National Textile Corporation with 6 mills, most of them dead mills, is growing. I would like to know about role of private sector in the matter of textiles. We have been hearing that the private sector is resorting to lockouts and even retrenchment. Is the government of India aware of the fact that the monopolies in our country are resorting to a policy of increasing profits by raising prices after reduction production? So their policy is anti-national. They reduce production and increase profit by raising the prices. In regard to production, we fear that we may again be in a mess. We have not been able to control lockouts, etc. And in regard to the production of groundnuts, cotton, and jute, there is an oversupply. The jute mills are crying that their products have not been taken up. In such a situation, this would hamper production next year when the real producers are not getting impetus, whether they produce food grains, edible oils, jute, sugarcane, cotton, or oil seeds. The danger is that they will not get adequate encouragement and the production may not go on steadily increasing as it did this year. As such, one would expect that the government would consider the fact that the jute mills are not doing justice to jute production, its growers, or even to its marketing. They are depending entirely upon the government. They are not reducing the price of jute goods. When the price of jute has gone down, naturally we expect that the price of jute goods will be less, but they are not cheaper. There is a crisis in the jute market, but the prices of finished goods are where they were. They are also slightly costlier in some respects. In such a situation, the production policy of the private sector is not helping the cause of the industry itself, much less to talk of that of the producers or consumers. Full stop. And the same thing applies to sugar mills and to cotton mills in private hands. One would feel that the time has come when the government should take up courage to nationalize at least jute, cotton, and sugar mills in order to be in a stronger position and to have a strong hand over production and to have a steady increase in production in order to have proper distribution and reasonable prices. Then comes the question of distribution. With regard to this, our government feels very helpless. The minister has indicated that the traders were reconciled to the emergency and were waiting on their wings to exploit the situation when the opportunity arose. The opportunity was the delay in onset of the monsoon by 3 weeks, which led them to hoarding and black marketing. He is saying in a helpless manner that some delay in the onset of the monsoon allowed them to resort to hoarding and black marketing. Therefore, they are committing these crimes at a time when there is a national emergency, when the government has more than adequate powers to control them. There should be a panel to deal with compilation of production data and identifying trends of significance and advising the government in time of need. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the recommendation on certain observations of the board with regard to the policy on children of our country is really speaking a very good outcome and a very good exercise. I have patiently heard the views on the policy as they were expressed by our Honorable Deputy Minister on the last day of the previous session. I also congratulated him for his attitude towards the children, but I would like to point out a few things on this national policy on children which is followed in other countries as well as in India. In India, perhaps it is a known fact both from the point of view of religion and that of ancient thinking that the child is treated as God. Usually, it is a common phenomenon both in the villages and the cities. This symbolizes our devotion to children. It also indicates our expectations, our devotion to children. It also indicates our expectations and our dreams about children. I could really appreciate that when we were under the British rule, we could not evolve a suitable policy in relation to children with a view to improving their conditions, but we are now a free country after taking oath as the Prime Minister of Free India. Jawaharlal Nehru never forgot to mention something about the children of India whenever he spoke, whether on the occasion of Republic Day, Independence Day, or anything else. He thought that the country could have been built much more given sufficient care and they had been made to feel that they were partners in all our work. This was also the thinking of Lenin in Soviet Russia. Immediately after the revolution, Lenin used to speak about children on all occasions and say that they should be given due care. This resulted in the formation of the Young Pioneers Group for children between the ages of 6 and 14 in Soviet Union and other socialist countries. In all the socialist countries, this group is recognized, engineered, financed, and administered by the governments and given highest priority in the matter of development. Similarly, measures have been undertaken recently in Iraq also. While I was there recently, I could see that they have adopted the same policy. The first priority is given to them by that country. In our country, many organizations do take care of the children, voluntary organizations and the state governments do provide them with many facilities. The recommendations are very nice if we read them. They appear to be much more constructive than even the young pioneer groups programs in the Soviet Union, but in actual practice, nothing has been done because of lack of funds. If everybody receiving a salary and paying income tax, wealth tax, gift tax, or vehicle tax is requested to participate in the endeavor to raise resources for children, nobody will object. If the journal masses pay 5 paise per individual per year, we can have a very sizable budget and a very constructive and comprehensive policy both at the center and in the states. When a child grows into a young man, he talks of sports and games. Look at the budget allocation for sports and games, which would help the development of the mental and physical potential of the young of our country. It is a small amount in comparison to what they spend in Middle Eastern countries. In a country having 100 crores of people, that is the second largest population in the world, children and youth are not given any financial expenditure support by the government. There is no compulsory item of expenditure for the promotion of the moral and cultural talents of the children in the national sphere. This work has to depend on some social organizations. I do not object to the participation of voluntary organizations, but I do feel that when a country proclaims itself to be a socialist country or a country on its march towards socialism, the looking after the youth and children should be the basic pillar of the policy of the country. What is the position in our country? The children are badly neglected. They do not know even their own parents. In our words of Jawaharlal Nehru, when a child is born in this country, it should consider the country is as its mother, and the country should consider the children as their own. Do our children think of our country in that way now? Today, the looking after of children is done by the father of a church because they feel that is the way to serve God. Sometimes we give them prizes or we recommend their names to the United Nations organization or other authorities for the award of Nobel or some other prize. But do you think that a country like ours should depend on a father of a church for the welfare of our children? The moment a child is born in our country, it should be the responsibility of the country under our constitution and the rule of law as it obtains today. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, the problems of the company audit, the difficulties experienced by the junior auditors, and the complaints of the audit profession in relation to these companies are before the government, and a comprehensive amending bill was introduced in this house in 1992, which was referred to the select committee of both houses of parliament, in which I happened to be a member where elaborate evidence was recorded not only from the chambers of commerce and industry but also from the chartered accountants and also others who had the special knowledge of the working of the companies. All these aspects were considered, and the committee came to the conclusion of fixing the number of companies an auditor personally or a firm of auditor could audit be at 20. Therefore, the mover could have withdrawn this bill and introduced another after the amendment to the company law came into force. One of the reasons advanced by the mover is that the social concept should be introduced into auditing, by which perhaps he means that there should be dispersal of audit work among the thousands of members of the audit profession. I respectfully submit that this is not possible. No work can be distributed because some auditors have little work or are starving, and some work should be given to them. This is not possible as an auditor, like a lawyer or a doctor, should have a reputation which would enable him to get the work of audit of a company. Naturally, companies would select auditors or firms of auditors who have a reputation in their profession. Therefore, it is not possible to introduce the social concept in auditing in fixing the number of companies a firm of auditors should have allowed to audit under the Act. His second point is that monopoly should be broken. The cry against monopoly is common nowadays, that there should be no monopoly houses, there should be no monopoly, and all that. If an auditor has attracted the audit work of a number of companies to himself, how can you say it is a monopoly when an auditor has no work because he has not earned a reputation in the field? How can there be complaint that he is not occupied? This happens in every profession. Only a few lawyers get the work. Work is concentrated among a few doctors. How can the others in the profession complain? Then there is the cry for nationalization of audit. The mover mentioned it while moving the bill. How can there be nationalization of a profession? Have we thought of nationalization of the legal profession or the medical profession? It is not possible. Can the state maintain a panel of lawyers? The state do appoint lawyers in case where a client is not able to engage a lawyer, but no government, no state can maintain a panel of lawyers, doctors, and so on to look to the needy. It is not a workable proposition. Nationalization may be a good slogan, but it does not work in relation to certain professions in which the success of an individual depends on his merit. Another point urged but the mover was that an auditor should be changed every 2 or 3 years. His main complaint is that an auditor or firm is auditors auditing the accounts of a particular company for a number of years may act in collusion with the firm and may not do the auditing faithfully or correctly, that he may be hand in glove with the company and its directors. In such cases where a chartered accountant is found to be guilty of misconduct, there are provisions in the Chartered Accountants Act under which action can be taken against him. It takes 2 to 3 years for an auditor to understand the working of a company. All these questions were gone into the joint committee in great detail, and then it was found that no limit could be put, though the number of companies an auditor could audit could be limited. The period during which he should be allowed to audit a company was not found to be capable of limitation as feasible, and that was why it was rejected. Another objection taken by the mover was that all the auditors are in the metropolitan areas. Necessarily, they should be from the metropolitan areas. They should know the working of companies. How can an auditor residing in a small town whose only business is to audit the accounts of small businessmen for sales tax purposes or for the purposes of other commercial taxes be entrusted with the work of auditing a company's accounts? It is a complicated affair. It is not possible. It is only in metropolitan cities that the auditors could carry on their profession. They get the whole time experience of accounts of the companies about costing. Also, I think the company law board can order an inquiry into the cost of production in a company. I think all those provisions have been made after elaborate discussion. Stop.